And today, we're diving into a fascinating psychological phenomenon that explains why some of the least capable people are often the most confident. You've probably encountered it at work, on social media, or even in your own friend group. Someone who is clearly out of their depth, but acts like they're the smartest person in the room. So, why does this happen? Well, we can thank a little thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias that causes people with low ability in a particular area to overestimate their competence. It was first described in 1999 by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who ran a series of studies proving that people who perform poorly on tests of logic, grammar, and even humor are often blissfully unaware of how bad they are. Essentially, they lack the skills to accurately assess their own shortcomings. Think of it like this. To know you're bad at something, you need a certain level of expertise to recognize what good even looks like. If you don't have that expertise, you might assume you're doing just fine, or even excelling. It's like if someone who's never cooked before thinks they can compete on MasterChef after making boxed mac and cheese. Dunning and Kruger's research also showed an interesting curve. People with some knowledge often underestimate themselves, while true experts tend to be more humble because they understand the vastness of what they don't know. This means that confidence peaks at low levels of competence, drops when people start learning more, and only stabilizes when someone becomes truly skilled. So, where do we see this effect in action? Oh, pretty much everywhere. The workplace. We've all had that coworker who confidently suggests terrible ideas in meetings, completely oblivious to their flaws. They talk over experts and dismiss feedback because they genuinely believe they know better. This is often why bad managers exist, because confidence is sometimes mistaken for leadership ability. Studies have even shown that incompetent people are more likely to be promoted because they appear self-assured, despite their lack of real skill. Social media experts. Ever noticed how people with little to no training suddenly become authorities on complex topics? Whether it's health, politics, or finance, the loudest voices are often the least informed. The internet gives a platform to those who speak with certainty, even if they lack real expertise. During crises, like a pandemic, you'll see misinformation spread rapidly by those who misunderstand the science but insist they know better than actual experts. Reality TV and talent shows like American Idol, have made careers out of this phenomenon. Some contestants are so convinced of their talent that they're genuinely shocked when the judges tell them otherwise. They're not faking their confidence. They genuinely believe they are incredible because they lack the skills to judge their own performance. Simon Cowell's brutally honest critiques often expose this in real time. Pseudoscience and conspiracy theories. The Dunning-Kruger effect also plays a big role in why some people fall for misinformation. Those with little scientific literacy may believe they understand topics like vaccines, climate change, or quantum physics better than experts who have spent decades studying them. Flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, and moon landing deniers are classic examples of people who overestimate their own ability to evaluate evidence. Driving skills. Studies have found that the majority of drivers rate themselves as above average, which is statistically impossible. This overconfidence leads to risky behaviors and accidents, as those who lack skill don't realize how poor their judgment really is. We live in a society that judges people for their answers, not their questions. This reminds me of a training course I went on a couple of years ago when there was an exam at the end. I spent the course asking questions and generally getting the teacher to go over concepts and processes several times. We then did the exam and got the results straight afterward. I did well and was one of the people who scored the highest. Others, including the teacher, expressed their surprise. Why? Because I asked questions, and that was associated with stupidity. I've worked in a corporate environment for nearly 20 years. In meetings, no one wants to ask questions. If something is explained, no one wants to question it. I see it all the time, daily almost, because people don't want to be judged as stupid. In the last British election, several politicians were lampooned for getting complex figures wrong when under live interview scrutiny. Yet, I wouldn't expect any businessman to know such figures by heart. But as a society, we want to hear answers, not questions. We want to follow and believe people who seem to know, rather than those who will ask. But ironically, it is the lack of questions that promotes ignorance. How can you know until you are taught? We can learn through experience, but that's mostly through mistakes. We are incompetent until we are competent. Society despises incompetence, but we also lampoon anyone who doesn't appear to have an answer. We do not ask, so we do not know. The confidence of the incompetent can be persuasive. Humans are wired to associate confidence with competence, which is why we sometimes trust the wrong people. Studies show that people who speak assertively are more likely to be believed, even when they are factually incorrect. This is why politicians, influencers, and even some business leaders have leveraged this bias to gain followings and power. Psychologists call this the illusion of explanatory depth, the idea that we think we understand things much better than we actually do. If asked how a zipper works, most people will say they know, until they have to explain it in detail. The same applies to complex topics like economics, science, or history. People who assume they know enough rarely question their own assumptions. But let's be real, none of us are immune to it. At some point in our lives, we've all been guilty of thinking we're better at something than we actually are. Maybe you thought you were a great driver until you had to parallel park in a tight spot. Or perhaps you assumed you were tech-savvy until you had to troubleshoot a real IT problem. So, how can we make sure we're not falling into the Dunning-Kruger trap ourselves? Here are some practical strategies. Stay humble. If you think you're an expert at something, ask yourself, have I actually studied this deeply, or do I just feel like I know it? True experts are always learning. Seek feedback. The best way to know your true skill level is to get input from people who are more experienced. Listen to constructive criticism instead of dismissing it. Embrace lifelong learning. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And that's a good thing. Question certainty. If someone speaks with absolute certainty about a complex issue, it's often a red flag that they might not know as much as they claim. Practice metacognition. This means thinking about your own thinking. Ask yourself, how do I know this is true? And, could I explain this concept to someone else? If you struggle, it may be a sign that you don't understand it as well as you thought. At the end of the day, we're all works in progress. Recognizing our own blind spots is the first step to actual growth. So next time you meet someone who seems way too confident for their skill level, just remember, it's not arrogance, it's science. Thanks for tuning in to The Confidence of the Clueless. Explanatory depth refers to the belief that we understand complex systems or concepts more thoroughly than we actually do. People often think they can explain something well until they are asked to break it down in detail, at which point they realize their understanding is superficial. Pseudoscience refers to beliefs, theories, or practices that claim to be scientific, but lack supporting evidence, proper methodology, or the ability to be tested or proven. It often relies on anecdotal evidence, cherry-picked data, or appeals to authority rather than rigorous scientific analysis. Examples include astrology, homeopathy, and certain conspiracy theories. Blissfully means in a way that is full of joy, happiness, or ignorance of trouble. In this context, it suggests that people are completely unaware of their own lack of skill, and they remain happy or confident because they don't realize their shortcomings. Cognitive relates to mental processes such as thinking, learning, memory, and perception. In this context, a cognitive bias is a systematic way our brains misinterpret or misjudge information, leading to errors in thinking,